Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I'm going to start my presentation. Okay, with a little bit of exaggeration of what our company can do, I started my presentation. Anyway, in my presentation, I'm going to focus on the importance of steel piles. And let's start with the example of Hurricane Katrina, 2005, which hit New Orleans, Louisiana. By Hurricane Katrina, more than 2,000 people died, and the main target was New Orleans. And one of the main features of the city was that a large area of the city was under the sea level, so it was prone to floods or inundation. Despite that, the infrastructure, such as water embankments, was not strong enough. So that is the result. The city was fully inundated, and the riverbank was destroyed by the water pressure of flood. And in this situation, our company was employed by the Army Corps of Engineers of the United States, and we rehabilitated some of the river dams, and also we reinforced or rehabilitated river embankments like this and like that. And the main topic of my presentation is, as you see in the synopsis, the implant structure. It's not about dental surgery. It's about civil engineering, and you haven't heard of implant structure in civil engineering. I'm sure you have not. And so this video shows what it is.
I am the Earth. This is a footing structure. This is an implant structure. The footing structure stands on my hands like blocks. I mean, it is sitting on me. On the other hand, implant structure is being clutched. So I am grasping it. From time to time, earthquake occurs. It can withstand. After that, tsunami hits. It can keep withstanding. That's the implant structure.
That is the implant structure. And at the time of the Great Japan earthquake, or the Great East Japan earthquake, 2011, a large number of objects which were made with traditional structure that is called footing structure or gravity structure were destroyed by tsunami or by liquefaction caused by the earthquake, such as these objects. If you look at the human size, you can see how large that object is, but still it was destroyed by the natural power of tsunami. And here again, this coastal levee was knocked down by the receding wave of the tsunami. the sea is on your right-hand side, and the land was on your left-hand side, and it was knocked down by the receding water. And the receding water is also powerful as the tsunami itself. And this breakwater was also destroyed by the liquefaction. And in this devastating situation in the eastern part of Japan, just one object survived tsunami and liquefaction. That was this double sheet piled floodgate. That little gate was made with double sheet piles, and it withstood tsunami. Also, it withstood liquefaction. So it stayed intact through the tsunami and earthquake. Now, this is a little experiment of how the implant structure is strong in comparison to the gravity structure. The scale is 1/6 to the actual size, but no matter how large you make the gravity structure, it is very fragile to the natural force of tsunami and earthquake. But on the other hand, the implant structure is kind of compact, but it is deeply embedded into the soil, so it can withstand tsunami and liquefaction. And one of the main challenges that risk management or disaster management community of Japan is facing is how to prepare the national land to the possible Nankai Trough earthquake. The Nankai Trough is kind of plate interface between the Philippine plate and the Eurasian plate. And it is predicted that a very large earthquake would occur in the near future. And that earthquake would be much larger, and the tsunami caused by that would be much larger than the time of the Great East Japan earthquake. So in the prefecture of Kochi, by the way, this is where the headquarters of my company is located. The national government and the local government are reinforcing the existing coast levee with the implant structure. So they are driving steel piles into the existing levee so that it can withstand tsunami, and so it can not be affected. It wouldn't be affected by the liquefaction to be caused by the earthquake. And these works are being carried out along the coast of Kochi Prefecture. And another damage caused by the earthquake is damage to storage tanks or fuel tanks. And at the time of the Great East Japan earthquake, a number of fuel tanks were damaged by the liquefaction caused by tsunami, and there was fire on the sea that hampered transportation of supplies into the people which needed those supplies. And so if you protect storage tanks with implant structure, meaning surrounding the tanks with piles, then those those tanks can withstand liquefaction, and you won't have fire on the sea or on the coast. And this is one of the actual works that we carried out in the northern part of Japan, just surrounding the fuel tank with steel sheet piles. And just this is one of the remarks about piling work. If you when you drive in piles somewhere, or like in the picture on your right-hand side, you have to prepare a large working platform and put several heavy machines, and then drive in piles along, for example, along the road. So you need a lot of space. So for that, you have to evacuate people, or evacuate houses, in order to drive in piles. But the picture on your left-hand side is, I'm sorry, this is a little bit commercial, but this is our machine. And if you use this machine, you don't have to use a working platform. This system can just carry on piling, working only on top of piles. And let's see how it works. Let's say there is a base on your left-hand side, and there are a number of piles in the base. And from the base, this transporter brings piles, and the crane on top of the piles picks up a pile and pitches in to the piling machine. So even on the water or anywhere, you can carry on piling without making a kind of a working platform. So you can save time and money by using this system. For example, this is a kind of a protection work of the landslide in Kyushu Island. So by the railway, the government wanted to drive in piles on this hill. If you use a traditional way of piling, let's go back. Can I go back? I can't. Usually you have to close the train track and make a platform there, and then do the piling work, and after the piling work, you remove the working platform and restart the train traffic. But if you use this system, you can do piling work while the train is working. So it saves not only kind of a budget, but also kind of social cost of the work. And another example of this system is kind of, again, piling work near Tokyo. There is kind of a coastal levee along the road, which serves as a retaining wall of the road as well. But that wall was kind of damaged, weakened by the high tide and sea waves. So the government wanted to reinforce the seawall. But this road is pretty busy, pretty important. And also there is a kind of train traffic which is being used by commuters. So the government didn't want to stop this train or car traffic. But the other side, you can see sand coast. But that sand coast is very important for local people, because local people take daily walks with the puppies on the coast. And some people jog on the coast, so they didn't want to close the sand coast for the piling work. So the government couldn't set up a working platform on either side. So they adopted our system. That this is how it worked. So without making any working platform, we just drove in steel piles directly into the existing sea coast levee. The last example is in Bangladesh. There's National Highway 1, which connects Dhaka and the second city, Chittagong. And there are 3 bridges near Dhaka. And the foundations or the bridge piers were scoured, became thin because of the many years of service. So they wanted to, the Bangladeshi government wanted to reinforce the bridge piers. At the same time, with the increase of the traffic, they wanted to build new bridges along each of the bridges. So the picture on your left-hand side, the existing bridge, and the completion image is not completely clear, but it is there are 2 bridges. One bridge is an old bridge, which is to be reinforced, and the second bridge, which is to be built as a new bridge. But again, piling works under the bridge is very tricky. If you use a traditional way, you need overhead space. So this is not Bangladesh, this is Japan. But for example, if you drive in piles for reinforcing bridge pier, what you have to do is first you have to remove the bridge girders, the above structure of the bridge. And then you make a diversion road, and you make the piling work, and after the piling work, you put back the bridge girders, and then you remove the diversion road. But if you use our machine like this, they are very small and compact, and it can drive in piles even under the bridge. So you don't have to disturb the current traffic. And with that, you can save money, time, and social cost. And that's what we did, that's what we were asked to do by the Bangladesh government. And this is what we're doing near Dhaka. And that concludes my presentation. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yaegashi. You demonstrated that a little video is worth 1,000 words. Maybe some of us can learn from that experience. Our last but not least speaker today is Junji Wakui from JICA, who's going to tell us, of course, JICA obviously uses a lot of Japanese technology. Tell us about their experience and some of the lessons learned in their program around the world. Welcome.
Thank you, Francis. Good morning, everybody. My name is Junji Wakui, and I am talking about JICA's experience of connecting Japanese science and technology for disaster risk reduction in developing countries. Needless to say, there are many of greatest threat issues on the global scale these days, such as climate change, crisis of new food production, major natural disasters, and new infectious diseases. And they need something to be something new and innovative to be solved. And in 2008, Japan launched a program called SATREPS, Science and Technology Research Partnership for Sustainable Development, as a framework for research-oriented international cooperation in order to resolve global issues by merging the ODA and domestic research fund. And SATREPS is implemented jointly by the following three agencies, JICA, to provide an official development assistance fund, and also Japan Science Technology Agency, JST, and Japan Agency for Medical Research and Development, AMED, to provide a competitive research fund. And objectives of SATREPS, the first one is international cooperation on STI, enhancing international cooperation on science, technology, and innovation between Japan and developing countries. And the second one is addressing global issues and advancing sciences, acquiring new knowledge and technology that lead to the resolution of global issues and the advance of science and technology, and through this process, creating innovations. And the third one is capacity development through them. And field, as the main target of SATREPS. There are four targets, and the first one is environment and energy, which is divided into two. The first one, global scale environment issues. The second one is advanced energy system for low carbon society, bioresources, and natural disaster prevention and mitigation, which we are talking about today, and infectious diseases control. And these are the framework of SATREPS. Here, this one is a research institute in Japan. On the right side is a research institute or ministries or any authorities in counterpart countries. And JICA support project implementation, such as Japanese researchers, provision of equipment and training of counterpart country personnel, and research activities in the recipient countries. And JST AMED support the Japanese Research Institute for the project activities in Japan. And this is the budget of SATREPS project. JICA provides $3 million, and JST AMED provide $1.75 million in 5 years in one project. And the table shows a breakdown of expenses. JST AMED covers the expenses in Japan, and JICA covers the expenses in recipient countries. This is the number of SATREPS projects. So far, totally 125 projects are implemented. And as for disaster prevention, as you can see, we have 23 projects. This is a regional distribution of SATREPS. 125 projects are implemented in 47 countries. 43% of them are implemented in Southeast Asia and Oceania, 22% in Africa, 16% Latin America, and so on. And as for the objective or purpose of natural disaster prevention and mitigation subsectors, there are four main purposes to contributing, clarifying the mechanisms of disasters associated with natural phenomena such as earthquake, tsunami, volcanic eruptions, storms, storm surges, inundation, drought, and landslide. And the second one is development of measures to mitigate the damage from major disasters. And the third one is to contribute to construction and the maintenance of cities with resilient science infrastructure. And the last one is collection, processing, effective provision, and utilization of disaster-related information. And I show you a project example. This is a project for enhancing of earthquake and volcano monitoring of effective utilization of disaster mitigation information in the Philippines. From Japanese side, Natural Research Institute for Earth Science and Disaster Prevention took part in, and from Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology took part in. Research needs. The Philippines are in the Western Pacific Plate subduction zone, as in the case of Japan, earthquake and volcano disasters occur frequently. And therefore, disaster measures and prediction techniques are urgently needed. Even after the devastating earthquake and tsunami in 2004 in the region, Philippines did not have this kind of efficient systems. So what kind of activities are done in this project? The first one is improvement of earthquake information. networking of newly developed broadband and strong motion seismometers and real-time intensity meters are introduced. And as a result, advanced and rapid earthquake analysis and early warning system were developed. Actually, the original of this system was the one called SWIFT in Japan. And Japanese institute modified it and transplanted it to Philippines. And this is another activities for accurate evaluation of earthquake generation potential, GPS campaign observation, geomorphological and geological surveys, and the carbon dating of geological strata were done, and real-time transmission and analysis system of seismic and infrasonic data are available now, and photogrammetry by drone were done as well. And as a result, new finding was brought, such as speed of strike slip of fault in Mindanao was revealed, which is 2.5 to 4.0 centimeters per year, whereas it is 1.0 centimeters per year in Japan, which is much faster than that in Japan. This is one of the example. Mechanisms of inland and subduction earthquake were revealed as well. The movement of plate and direction were revealed as well. And the estimation of the return period and the potential magnitude was brought. This is very important to consider the mitigation measures. And another activities is integrated volcano monitoring. GPS receiver at Tar and Mayon volcanoes, magnetotelluric meters and total intensity magnetometer at Tar volcano were installed. And real-time transmission and analysis system of data are now available. And the new findings about structure of Tar volcano, including hydrothermal activities and high potential of ferritic explosion, are revealed as well. And improved disaster mitigation information was provided now. Research result, in short, real-time earthquake and earthquake intensity observation network were introduced to enable prompt and accurate estimate of earthquake motion distribution and damage, cluster movement observation for assessing the potential for earthquake on the inland island of Mindanao, and integrated earthquake cluster movement and electromagnetic observation of Tar and Mayon volcanoes in order to determine and predict underground magma activities. And research activities of SATREPS. 125 projects have so far created 2,466 academic papers and 7,255 presentations at academic conferences and 50 patent applications. Also, scholarship is being provided to 71 students. Lessons learned or challenges. I wrote here 3 points. The first one is sustainability. Even if the research activities or new system developed or new devices developed are very excellent, often they are not used continuously because of very simple reasons such as lack of electricity, a lack of efficient telecommunication systems, a lack of capacity of researchers or practitioners, or even lack of the budget. The second one is not from supply, delivery side, but from needs on the ground. Usually, we want to use what we do have, or we want to do what we want to do and push it to the recipient country. But sometimes it doesn't need the real needs of them on the ground. They are not accepted. They have their own needs, and we need to pick them up and grow it up them together with them. This is the second point. And the third one is utilization of the outcomes for the benefit of the society. I mean, a social and practical application. Even though we are requesting each of the satellite projects to include a component to do this for social and practical application, many of them are struggling to achieve this social and the practical application of the result of the project. It is meaningless if the research activities or new system or devices are not used by policymaker or decision maker or by citizens. Okay, this is the third point. The reason why this happens, why it is not accepted. Let me show you an example of a monitoring system. This is not an island. This is an iceberg. And a monitoring system, new one, regarded innovative solution like this. However, to function it continuously, IT subsystem, a standardization of data structure, standardization of system architecture, or communication infrastructure, definitely necessary and very basic. And also, IT maturity of the society to float the iceberg is also very necessary. In addition, legal framework, guideline for data stock and management, operation guideline in each field are also necessary. And most importantly, the capacity development, human resources is necessary. This is new system. New system is regarded as a tip of an iceberg in this case. Let me show you another example. DRR in Japan is a package of tools. Japan is a disaster-prone country. Various experience we have, earthquake, tsunami, typhoon, volcanoes, and because of that, we developed lots of laws and regulations consist of building standards, acts, or institutions, or basic plan for emergency preparedness as well. And we have observation, forecast, and alert system, which is being operated now. Weather radars and meteorological satellite we have, and the flood analysis system, rain-based flood model as well. And infrastructure, we continuously constructed and steadily constructed infrastructure to prevent the disasters. And also urban planning is very important. And the bottom, DRR culture, this is also very important. People need to understand the necessity of investment, and also they need to prepare by themselves for the big disasters. And with all these, we have a high and unique technology, preventive measures, and effective mitigation measures we have. At last, I'd like to mention something for future discussions. The first one is innovative project for the part under the water. As I showed you, people tend to think something innovative is good looking and very prominent and fancy and so on as a tip of an iceberg. But I don't think that not necessary that innovation happen only above the surface. And there are many things, important things under the water, and I think innovation can be done under the water as well. And it is even more important because it changes things deeper and more substantial and globally. However, I think it is a bit difficult to do this kind of innovative project under the water by donors like JICA, because we need to look at each country's every time, face by face. However, I am talking about the second lines. However, this kind of project under the water can be done easily by the multiple donors like the World Bank, because World Bank can think things regionally and globally at higher level. This is examples which I think innovative project under the water. If these are implemented, everybody will be happy, and this kind of my expectation to the World Bank. For example, application of satellite images for prompt post-disaster needs assessment, downscaling of climate change scenarios from continental size scale to even river basin scale, an accumulation of disaster statistics globally, analysis of economic effect of pre-disaster investment, or evaluation of potential risks. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wakui. In the interest of time, I'd like to propose that we keep the small Q&A session we had for now to the end of this morning event, and that we move straight to our short panel discussions. The speakers who you've heard today will be there. They will remain after. We'll have light refreshment and lunch. So you'll be able to meet with them and ask even more personalized questions. And many of them will be on the panel, so we'll be able to listen more deeply. So I'm going to invite to the podium first Dr. Satoru Nishikawa will be our moderator. Please, maybe there in front, as well as Ede, Senior Director for the Global Practice on Urban Social Resilience. Ede, I don't always remember all the part of the acronym. Mr. Naohiro Nishiguchi, the President of the BOSAI Forum, Professor Toshi Koike from iCharm, and then Professor Kimio Takeya, who didn't provide a presentation, but is Distinguished Technical Advisor to the President of JICA and Visitor Professor at Tohoku University on International Research of Disaster Science, IRIDES, which is another well-respected program in Japan. Dr. Satoru, the floor is yours. We'll have this panel maybe for half an hour, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and then we'll open for questions. The other speakers are still in the room, so we can direct those questions first to the panel, but then to the entire group. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Francis. And it's my great honor to be able to moderate this short panel. So without further ado, I would like to first ask Professor Kimio Takeya for his very short presentation, his initial inputs to kickstart our panel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I just want to, I have no chance to make the presentation before session, so just a very short presentation I want to do. So usually we are the development assistance donors. So usually every country developed from the primitive phase to sequentially grade up one by one from the very, for example, for the infrastructure, usually we JICA build the port infra, then road and disaster prevention and so on. But by the innovative technology, science and technology, sometimes make the breakthrough far away from like this sequential development is sometimes passed away to the directly jump up to the next, stage of the each development phase. But anyhow, especially by the IT technology and innovative science and technology, sometimes even very least development country can drive up, step up, pass to the middle income countries sometimes, and they are divided to two types of a country, which is getting the innovative ways as their, development methodology, or lose their chance, not as before. So, and by this, the getting profit countries and losing profit country divided, another redistribution of global asset will happen. So this is what we are facing, that our traditional support to the developing country or traditional support for the trickle-down methodology is sometimes no more efficient or sometimes such a situation. And on the same time, this will divide it to two groups, even within the same country. Not only that another country or inter-country, but within the same country, just across the road, there are rich and poor living in the same place, like India. Bangalore, something like that. And also, already our colleague Wakui-san said that there's many applications we are requested from the government or developing government. And sometimes they say that is IT or science and technology high tech but high cost, or fit to developing countries' capacity, or is supported to IT or science and technology innovative system obsolete within soon few years, or how to get sustainable growth after support, especially when we use as a loan. Grant is okay, but using the loan, they must pay back for more than 30 years. But the tip of the iceberg, fancy or innovative solution will be obsolete within 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So, as already Wakui-san said, show the tips of iceberg. So I don't say the same thing. But something like a compare application or science and technology innovation tools like a tree. So the communication infrastructure and IT maturity of the society is like a ground, and ground gives some fertilization through the roots, and social system for data stock and management is very fundamental. By this, the standardization of the system architecture, standardization of data structure, or training for human resources, trunk of the tree. So by this, we can harvest many applications as a fruit. And what will happen? Usually, trigger pilot application or trigger support will be done by the donors. But software or interface or science and technology, modern innovative technology will be changing within few years. So unfortunately, sometimes leaves will falling down. But we must, data and human resources, by the capacity building, they can reborn again by themselves. So this is the most important thing for us. So once again, I want to make the lower portion like a subsystem, like a TCP/IP or version 5 or version 6 or everywhere in the network computing or subsystem for the database system. This is market-driven. This technology was made by the market-driven mechanism. But anyhow, the center portion is human resources, data is a fortune. Even top of the iceberg will absolute within few years. So the most important thing is under the seawater, not the hardware, not the software. I used to say that useware. So how to use the modern science and technology to the development country. This is the most important thing we believe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Takeya. Now, I would like to invite our distinguished panelists to provide any comments, thoughts. So, may I ask Ede, because you are now here, to provide your initial, I would say, observations or initial things. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ishikawa. Look, fascinating presentations. Let me do a couple of reflections. First, the issue, if I may say, the sector of the disaster risk management and the Sendai framework philosophy has led within the World Bank to have what I believe is one of the most innovative teams that is really always doing horizon scanning of new technologies. My hypothesis is that it's very cultural. You have a community of practitioners that are usually faced with enormous challenges after a disaster. And there's an outpouring of generosity from the private sector and from the researchers and from the community to try to experiment and bring solutions to things that are really, really difficult to tackle. So in situations as desperate as the earthquake in Haiti, The application of social media technologies and the application of practical engineering solutions to rapidly make a determination of the safety of thousands of buildings very rapidly was something that I'm not sure that if we were under a normal project development circumstance would have come about. I think that it is this passion in the sector for rapid response and for early application and replication of lessons that makes a huge difference. Second, I think that these exchanges become really important because one of the challenges that we have is not only the iceberg that you were describing, but the hundreds of icebergs that we have, which is at any given time, our portfolio of disaster risk management covers generally more than 100 countries. And they are at very different stages of technology utilization. So for us, it's not only how do you go deep into the iceberg and make all the hardware, software, and newsware, but actually how do you learn from the different icebergs that are at very different stages. And therefore, the work that we have been doing with the Tokyo DRM Hub, the Tokyo Development Center, the exchange with Japan, become important because it allows us to have platforms to bring countries to learn not only the technology, and I was so pleased to hear in every presentation the issue that it's not the technology alone that is going to fix the problem. It's all these other elements of user interface, of maturity of the systems, of understanding of the whole ecosystem and the whole of society to tackle these issues. Let me finish by saying that actually we are beginning to see a lot of technologies being connected in the disaster risk management environment. So the use of drones is now becoming a really pretty much a standard tool for rapid assessment and understanding of damages after disasters. Last one was in Tonga, and actually it's now no longer an innovation. We actually don't even celebrate the use of drones. It's actually now a standard tool. It is also beginning to spill over into post-conflict situations. So, for example, in Iraq, over the last 2 years, even though it has been in a conflict situation, we have been able to do, as well as in Syria and as well as in Yemen, dynamic damage needs assessment using not only satellite information, which actually is by now is a standard tool for us. 3-4 years ago, it was a massive innovation, but now combined with social media information that allows us to know and to do triage of different sources of information to understand not only where the damages are today, but also understand which communities, which neighborhoods, which groups are more resilient and are actually in the middle of the war dealing and surviving and finding practical solutions to restore energy, to restore water, to restore a lot of the services. I think that the use of mobile technology is now becoming part and parcel of what we do on the disaster risk management. And as part of President Kim's initiative on disruptive technologies, the questions for us is not only what are the best technologies out there that we need to continue to bring to our clients, but it's also how do we help institutions, communities, citizens, societies become more adaptable to the rapid change of technology. There was a quote a few weeks ago. We had a speaker from Singularity University and out of the couple of hours of conversation, there was a quote that stayed with me, which is, and in a way is similar to what Professor Takeya was saying. Is not so much the ability to get one technology and adapt it, but it's how institutions learn to ride a bicycle. Because the bicycle needs to be very adaptive to a rapid changing landscape as the institutions are moving forward and to different things that are coming their way in technologies. The speed of change on technology is becoming so fast that we need to find models and we need to find capacity building processes that allow these institutions to become more adaptable to whatever comes their way, and to understand what's the next generation, to be able to be on the frontier and thinking on that process. And it's not only institutions, but also societies and individuals. And to us is how do you connect different stakeholders of society, because you will always find the youth, entrepreneurs, certain civil society organizations that are ahead of the game and are able to bring actually that adaptability to the process. And the second question for us is how do we accelerate the process of moving from a successful pilot experience in a given place to hundreds of countries that are in our portfolio? How do we make sure that it's not only a transplantation of the technology, of a transplantation of the system, but it is really an adaptation, an understanding of the roots, an understanding of the failures of that implementation, to be able to have more countries moving into this process. And I think that what Mr. Wakui was saying of a potential role for the World Bank is really to be able to be a connector of an honest broker of these experiences, so that in a way our projects and the projects that we implement with partners such as JICA become experiments and leading experiments that you learn from each other, like in a global laboratory, so that everybody learns from each other faster. And it's not that we have a technology that gets implemented, the system gets in place, after 5 or 10 years, you can start transplanting the lesson. That doesn't work anymore in this world. It's too slow. So a few reflections out of the great presentation that we had today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now, let me invite Mr. Hiro Nishiguchi for his comments or...
Let's talk about disruptive technologies, which seems to be a very important topic for the bank. Actually, what we should be looking for is not necessarily disruptive technology, but I think disruptive impact. And we within the innovation community, we often say that technology itself has no value. But technology can create a value only when it is combined with a purpose and well thought out implementation and discipline. So I think actually it is very important to have great technologies, but unless they are combined with other important components, it does not create, frankly, any value in the society. That would be my comment.
Thank you. Now, let me invite Professor Koike for his observations.
Okay. I think that I want to emphasize 2 points there. As Mr. Wakui introduced and Mr. Takeya introduced some iceberg model, in my talk I introduced a data system, data integration analysis system. These are kind of the backbone science and technology which can incubate innovative science and technology. So when I organized the training course of the climate change impact assessment to the Asian country, I request them to submit the language data, which can be used for the climate model bias correction and downscaling. And I introduced our system. Each participant submitted the data, more than 30 years, the 50 station data in a basin. They are willing to provide the data and register the data into our system, and then they get the climate change impact assessment in a very, very smooth way by using the system. So such kind of the backbone, the infrastructure we need. The second point is the education. We need to consider how can we connect the science and technology and the policy making and the community practice to make their distance closer. So I think we need to develop the better capacity for handling the knowledge and experiences between the science and technology and policy making and community practice back and forth. So this kind of the education system, the natural science and engineering the part and policy making toward that the double standard the education system we need. But as you mentioned, it takes time. We need a speed. So easy to notice and highly visibility that undoubtedly very important. We need to maybe demonstrate the merit to the country. They are not so fancy, but but they're modest. But such kind of the system can provide a merit. We need to demonstrate the merit to them, and then they encourage the people to go forward. So that is my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Koike. Professor Takeya, do you have any additional comments so far?
Yeah, thank you very much. I personally I'm the main negotiator from the Japanese government for the Sendai framework. So I'm fully involved in the formulating the Sendai document. But during the document formulation, we discussed with the developing country who are vulnerable to the disaster. And personally, I always think about primitive but practical to the developing country. But on the other hand, I also want to find out the modern technology which can break through the situation. So the keyword for me is normally like structure measures, which is shown from Japanese company, private sector, sometimes such a physical structure, we need more constant budget, and sometimes primitive but practical, and sometimes high technology is suitable for some specific area. But on the other hand, always we struggling cost, and capacity, and breakthrough. For example, after the Sumatra tsunami, we donor make them very many projects for the silent alert system for the tsunami. But for the next tsunami will happen 100 years later. Until next tsunami happen, the old structure measure like such a kind of alert system will be obsolete or shut down. On the other hand, for example, also breakthrough technology, like a cell phone broadcasting technology, using the cell phone normal, not the talking band, but the normal connecting band, using the band with Japan, using this band to make the alert. For example, for the Yokohama city area, even foreign visitor staying in the beach side with the cell phone, smartphone, they can get to the tsunami alert within no registration of the phone number using the cell phone technology, broadcasting technology. By this is something like a breakthrough technology with very cheap cost and almost no capacity building not needed for the government and so on. And the Yokohama city built this model, this system, only spending $70,000 to make the alert. All the Yokohama Bay areas, including the foreign visitors. This is something like one example for the breakthrough. So I always want to find out this kind. On the other hand, for looking for the future, like Koike Sensei explained about a very metadata system, that maybe perhaps that will lead our future direction. And from that future direction, we must do today as a low regret investment. We must do something today, not waiting for the future conclusion or reducing the uncertainty, of course, but we must make low regret investment today. So this is my point. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we have been able to abstract several important points during presentations and discussions. And the picture of the iceberg or the picture of the tree, which Professor Takeya showed us, really shows the necessity to not only address the latest technology, but also to have them combine with existing structures, existing culture, existing, I'll say, mechanisms. And that is one of the points that we always have to bear in mind. But at the same time, we must be able to take in the latest technologies. And some of them would be kind of a leapfrogging technologies, which might give us a big chance to have great advancements. And if anyone of the panelists would like to comment about any, I would say, emerging technologies that you have seen or you would like to highlight, I would like to invite any comments regarding any new breakthroughs. Please.
Actually, not necessarily a particular way, but I would say the most important approach for anybody in this room can take is to take an innovative combination of existing tools, technologies, and leapfrog technologies. And by definition, leapfrog technology keeps leapfrogging like every 2 weeks. So we always have new technologies. So I think if we have a very clear intent to keep finding an innovative combination of several dots, which are usually not connected at all. And I think that is a very important approach. And we always have a new technology, leapfrog technologies, and innovative technology, whatever the new things. But unless we have a very clear intent to connect all dots together with a very clear purpose, I think we will miss a huge opportunity.
Thank you. Professor Koike, please.
Okay. I'm very echo to the Nishiguchi-san. As I introduced the end-to-end approach, not the standalone or snapshot of the technology and science. This is the key science and technology, very important, but we need to make a bridge between end to end. That kind of the holistic design is very important. So to promote this kind of the science and technology, innovative technology, as a whole, as I mentioned again, we need some infrastructure. So that is my point. Thank you very much.
No, let me build on that a few reflections. And because these issues of technology, they have a couple of also difficult questions that we are trying to tackle in the World Bank. And it's actually very related to the Quality Infrastructure Initiative in Japan. Because the approach for cost-benefit analysis of these innovative technologies become very different. When you have well-tested technologies and their well-known circumstances, then we do know how to do cost-benefit analysis. These processes of innovation and replication and scaling up and the use of science and technology become very different into this process. The second is also the standard procurement doesn't work anymore. So because it's not that it's a tested technology, we know the ranges of cost, and therefore you're looking for traditional bids into this process. And I think that this, particularly in disaster risk management, is going to require different perspectives into this process. Let me build also on the issue of the latest technology. One of the risks that we see with many counterpart countries is that is the fascination of some agencies to buy the latest technology without the understanding the hard work that it requires to be used. So the case that I use that are actually now catching up is the city of Rio that had a partnership with IBM and built the most sophisticated data center that brought together data from all institutions in the city. And it was so much data that they could never use it. and actually sat down in a beautiful room with lots of screens popping up data live, and it was probably terabytes of data coming up into this process, and without the institutional capacity to handle. So I think that a word of caution on that fascination into the process, and also I like what you said, which is really the issue that is not only the technology itself, but actually what we see in many countries that is important is process innovation, meaning how do you adapt the technology to practical uses to find very local solutions. So so for example, we had an interesting initiative where women entrepreneurs were looking at technology for disaster risk management process. And we were looking at what is the connection between women entrepreneurs and technology in disaster risk management? And it's actually because the way in which generally women heads of family tend to think about resilience and handling shocks at the family level gives a very different perspective of how do you appropriate technologies to be able to make families more resilient. And therefore, they become better entrepreneurs at thinking that the adaptation of technology to disaster risk management. So there are interesting connections that disruptive technologies will, and particularly in this space on disaster risk management, that we're just beginning to explore into this process. Let me finish with what Professor Koike was saying, and actually you said it a couple of times, and I want to emphasize, and that is the issue that even the best of technologies that today are not able to give us precise answers for the deep uncertainty of climate change at the local level. And therefore, the research that you're doing is moving us into that direction. But the reality is that we also need to figure out how do we deal with two important uncertainties, technology change and deep uncertainty from climate change. So many of our mayors and governors come and say, look, we're doing all these infrastructure investments. Are we investing in the right infrastructure, given that there's going to be so much technology change that maybe this infrastructure will be obsolete? And the design standards that we're putting into this infrastructure may be the wrong ones, just because the uncertainty on climate change, we don't know at the local level what's going to happen. Every model tells us a different thing. So these two uncertainties combined for many of our clients can become overwhelming into this process. And I think that the research that Professor Koike and many others are doing are going to be very important. And the translation of those data models, those platforms, to practical advice on the engineering designs of today, and how these designs become adaptable to whatever future changes in technology and whatever future changes on climate are really going to become really, really important and valuable to the future of these countries.
Thank you. Now, let me raise another point. That is, how can we better share the lessons learned? And when I say lessons, it means successes and also failures as well. And we have seen many, I'll say, innovative technologies which were applied and which were successful. As Ed has just mentioned, we have many experiences of the latest technologies being introduced but not fully utilized. And how can we share both of these lessons are quite important so that we would be able to invest better for the future. So if any of the panelists would like to comment on this topic, I'd like to invite any of you to comment. Please.
I think the question can be redefined as what is the best knowledge management approach for disaster risk reduction. And I would say the worst approach would be just to create a gigantic database, which nobody will be looking at, and which happens a lot. And I think instead, it may take some time, but I think a very periodical discussion like this but not only in Washington, D.C., but by connecting like your field offices, like in Africa, Asia, Latin America, like periodically, so that we can have actually dialogue. And good news about technology, now we can do that very effectively. And I would say that the JBP would be very willing to have such a dialogue with not only with headquarters or in Tokyo, but also with field offices, and obviously through your Tokyo office. But I think having some lively discussion, continuous discussion with many stakeholders will be very important. And I think as an innovation expert, as an expert in innovation, that seems to be probably most effective and efficient way, because frankly, nobody would like to look at like a long list of technology. So I think that I would strongly encourage to have a live discussion with many stakeholders, particularly in the field.
Look, let me bring to the conversation a couple of experiments that we're having with the government of Japan that I find very interesting. And they are our Tokyo DRM Hub and our Tokyo Development Learning Center. Because one of the problems that we found in these issues of exchange of knowledge is that our traditional way of getting some of our counterparts in developing countries to come to another country to learn was not really leading to deep enough changes into this process. So what we have done with the Tokyo Development Learning Center and the DRM Hub is to move to a methodology by which we prepare technical deep dives that allows us not to bring one counterpart, but 10, 15 different countries from around the world with not very big groups that do a lot of homework before they get on the plane to learn about what is it that they're going to see. Spend a week in Japan not only learning about Japan, but actually learning from each other on the challenges that they're facing. We spend a lot of time working with Japanese experts because the most important part is not the successes, but the failures. And it becomes very important because, for example, we hear about all the lessons from the Great Tsunami in Japan, but it's only when you begin those deep conversations that you understand what went very well, and that's usually very well written. You can read about the good lessons. What you don't write as much is on the failures. And it's not in Japan, it's everywhere. And therefore we found, for example, that why children, the proportion of deaths of children in the Great Tsunami was much lower than the general population. But actually the proportion of people with disability was much higher. And it's not the lack of access, because Japan has excellent infrastructure, disability-friendly infrastructure, but it's the social cohesion so that people know that if there's a tsunami alarm, who is going to be taking care of which people with disability in the community, and who's the backup if that person does. And that social system it needs to be paired hand in hand with the technology. And then the second lesson that we learned was actually that most of the heads of committees for the shelter management were men. And men generally are not very good at packing for vacation. Usually, and therefore it was a big change to be able to have more women head there. Because when the women and girls arrive to the shelter, it's like, and they open the supplies, it's like, really? This is what you have here? This makes no sense for us to have the process. And therefore, it's that analysis of the lessons learned and what didn't work and what were the problems fixed that actually makes a big difference into this process. So our experience with the Tokyo Development Learning Center and the Tokyo DRM Hub has been very productive, and actually is becoming an innovative methodology to learn about innovative solutions into this process. So it's not only if you use traditional approaches to learn about new technology and new solutions, it doesn't work. I think that the innovation also needs to be in the delivery mechanism and in the knowledge sharing mechanism.
Yeah, by expressing the one word, it's working together. That is undoubtedly important. I'm now, the ICHAM is a UNESCO Category 2 center, and in collaboration with UNESCO IHP and the WMO, the United Nations University and UNISDR, we are now promoting the International Flood Initiative. And in collaboration with Asian countries at this moment, we are now establishing the platform by inviting the water-related disaster-related the department. In case of the Myanmar, the meteorology, hydrology department, and disaster management department, and river works department, and agricultural irrigation department. The director general of these departments, they joined together, and we made the design of our collaborative work. At that time, we demonstrate the possible benefit through the working together, and stimulate their spirit of commitment and also the can-do spirit. And they are willing to provide the data and work together, then make a design of the comprehensive framework. So I have a lot of the experiences there in that way, and very fortunately and happily, in collaboration with the World Bank and the government of Brazil, we are now introducing the drought monitoring and the prediction system to the northeast part of the Brazil, where the more than 6 years the drought damage are now happen. So we are very happy to work together and share this science and technology knowledge with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Just answer to the question of the moderator, how can we share the lesson learned? So we, JICA, as a bilateral donor, supporting the central government DRR agency more than 20 years, 2 decades or 3 decades, but after the center meeting or center framework, we started regional meeting together. They invited to Japan and discuss not only the one country, but the 5 or 6 countries from the same central government DRR agency to share each lesson learned, how to prepare for the center framework. For example, Target E, establish local DRR strategy. What is the gap? What is the barrier? What budget or capacity or something like such a discussion among each Indonesia, Philippines, and Sri Lanka, and Myanmar, and some other country. Very beneficial to each other. For example, like Indonesia said that we decided to spend 1% of the government budget to DRR. So another country want to introduce that to their own country. So such a kind of interactive discussion, even our bilateral donor is already started. And one more thing is, as Vasquez-san said, that the procurement system, how to share or how to mobilize the most modern technology or know-how. In some case, we must drill down to use the sole source direct contract. After the Thailand flood, we made direct contract to more than $3 million US contract just for the flood forecasting for 1 week, 10 days future inundation forecasting. That was the best using modern technology of using the RRI model from the ICHAM, and in order to mobilize this within 3 months. We did not hesitate to use the direct contract. So breakthrough 25 years prohibited period of the direct contract. So that's one of the ideas. Thanks.
Okay, I'm afraid that the time is up. And I think today we had, I will say, a wide variety of speakers from the bilateral donor, JICA, a multilateral donor, the World Bank, the scientific community, Professor Koike, the private sector, Mr. Nishiguchi and our colleagues from companies, and I myself from the Japanese government. And I think this kind of a good mix of various, I would say, players having good discussions and having communications, and these, not only these face-to-face meetings, but through the TDLC in Tokyo and through other channels. I think we should continue such dialogue to better share the lessons and to address the entire iceberg as well. So I would stop here and hand over the mic to Francis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're getting to the end of this morning event. We've had some fascinating speakers. We have a few minutes for burning question and answer, but as I've said, we'll have light refreshment and light lunch outside, and all the speakers, all the participants will be there. So if you have a precise question, you'll be able to actually mingle with them and ask a particular question. So I just want to make sure there's no generic question that someone would really like to ask. And in that case, I'm going to invite John Room, our Senior Director for Climate Change, to provide some closing remarks. Thank you, John.
So thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much to all the participants. I'm sorry I couldn't spend all the time here this morning, but I did manage to hear some of the earlier presentations, and I'll come back and touch on a few of those later. So first of all, to put this in a global context, both disaster resilience and climate change are critical development issues. We've done some analytics that shows that the current annual cost of disasters is $500 billion a year, more or less, and it's increasing, and the poor are hit harder than anybody else. We also have analytics that show that unless we address climate change, we'll have 100 million more people living in poverty by 2030. And we also know that even if we can get emissions down to the Paris levels, by the end of the next century, we will still have at least a 1 meter rise in sea levels. So even if we can get the emissions down, given what we've done already, we still need to build resilience. And so this is absolutely critical going forward. Second observation is that obviously some of this is about money, but a lot of this is about technology and innovation and cutting-edge information to allow us to do a better job of building resilience. And when I think about this, part of it's disruptive technology, meters that we heard about earlier to detect earthquakes earlier. Some of it's about building models, but it's not just the technology, it's also institutional innovation. And I think we heard some of these institutions and how they fit together. The technology plus the institutions is what gives us the impact. We've heard a lot of examples on that. And so I think this is a great discussion. I think we have a tremendous partnership between the World Bank Group and Japan, spoken large. You talked about all the different Japanese players, not just the Japanese government, public sector, private sector institutions, a very strong track record. And it's one that, sort of at least from my personal experience, if I think back, I worked a lot in South Asia and on East Asia. So I was in South Asia when the tsunami came and when the earthquake hit Kashmir. And I distinctly remember that in the Kashmir earthquake, one of the key elements of the rebuilding and the design was the structural designs for houses going forward. And in that rebuilding program, there was a requirement to introduce strengthening of buildings that was based directly on the Japanese experience, much like the ones that you talked about earlier, to allow this to go forward. I just caught the last end of your comment on direct contracting. One of the things actually that struck me was after the Great East Japan tsunami, how there was Japanese experience on how you had put pre-contracting, pre-positioning of contractors in place that actually allowed things to happen. And so that's not a technological innovation, it's an institutional innovation, which is very easily replicable to other places. And sort of, it's one of these things that's kind of obvious when you see it afterwards, but it's a great innovation that allows things to move. I think that this transmission of expertise and innovations is really helpful. So every time I hear, so I was just here for maybe half an hour this morning, and I've made a list of sort of 4 sets of things that I at least took out of that struck me. Number one, which I didn't know before, was this idea of getting a reduced interest rate if your house has been certified as seismic resistant. Making that mechanism that internalizes the externality and builds it into the financial sector. I'm sure for most of you this is old news, but for me this was something I didn't realize that you'd actually done that. So I think that was really good. Very impressed by the innovation on integrated climate change modeling. Taking better information on the water, driving it through to the adaptation. That was very striking. Clearly lots of opportunities for data services from the private sector. And I really like the comment about as we move forward, we have to move away from a vendor-based model of collaboration to a partnership-based model of collaboration. I think we're seeing this across climate change in general. There's so many people doing different things. And even on knowledge and analytic work that we do, an old model that simply says, well, we'll decide what we're going to do, and we're going to just contract you in order to do it according to some tight specifications, is not enough. And so this ability to think about what can each one of us contribute to this partnership, both between public sector institutions and public and private, is absolutely critical. So I think to me, it's certainly, even just the little bit I saw was hugely valuable. I think it's symptomatic of a wider partnership, which I think is extremely helpful. I'd like to close just with a few thank yous. First of all, broadly to the participants for everything that they contributed. I think it's really helpful going forward. Secondly, a little bit more internally to our Japanese executive director and our office in Tokyo for the work that they did to facilitate this event. And finally, to the DRM hub and the TDLC in Tokyo, which is sort of a mechanism or an infrastructure to make these kinds of discussions much more fruitful, much more systematic. What's always struck me about those kinds of interventions is that they get into a lot of really useful technical data. My sense of are these things valuable is are hard-working professionals who can be doing other things with their time turning up to these events, and do they come again? And we clearly see this through the DRM hub and the TDLC in Tokyo. So huge thank you very much. I think this is very important stuff. Thank you.